Now this video is brought to you by Ustadhi Academy. Now in this video we're going to be speaking more about Othman Ibn Affan's life. This is going to be part 4. Uthman was a shrewd businessman and a very successful trader from his youth, which contributed greatly to the Rashidun Empire. Omar had established a very public allowance, and on assuming office, Uthman increased it by about 25%. Omar had placed a ban on the sale of lands and the purchase of agricultural lands in conquered territories. Uthman withdrew these restrictions in view of the fact that the trade couldn't actually flourish. Uthman also permitted people to draw loans from the public treasury under Omar. It had been laid down as a policy that the lands in conquered territories were not to be distributed among the people, but were to remain the property of the previous owners. He was totally fair. The army felt dissatisfied at this decision, but Omar suppressed the opposition with a strong hand. Uthman followed a policy, of course, devised by Omar, and there were more conquests, and the revenues from land increased considerably. The politics of Egypt played that major role in the revolt against the Caliphate. The governor of Egypt under Uthman, Abdullah ibn Sa'd, was criticized by Egyptians for heavy-handed governing and tax policies and whatnot. After demands from the Egyptians, Uthman dismissed Abdullah ibn Sa'd as Egypt's governor and replaced him with Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. Now, after getting the post, while Ibn Abi Bakr and his supporters were on their way to Egypt, they came across the Caliph's envoy. The rebels searched for the envoy's personal belongings and found it. A letter purportedly written by Uthman himself, which was to be sent to Abdullah ibn Sa'd. In the letter itself, it was Ibn Abu Bakr and his supporters then set to Medina. It was Uthman ordered death punishment for Ibn Abi Bakr and his supporters engaged by the letter. Ibn Abi Bakr and his supporters then set off to Medina to threaten the Caliph. After the rebels arrived, Ali saw the letter and had a conversation with Uthman, who claimed to have been unaware of the letter. Historians have suggested that the letter may have been authored by Marwan ibn al-Hakam without Uthman's knowledge. Rebels in Medina from Egypt, Kufa and Basra, about 1,000 people apiece were sent to Medina, each with instructions to assassinate Uthman himself and overthrow the government. Representatives of the Egyptian contingents waited on Ali and offered him the caliphate, but he turned them down. Representatives of the contingent from Kufa waited on al-Zubayr, and those from Basra waited on Talha, each offering them their allegiance. They were about to pledge their allegiance to them as the next caliph, but both were similarly turned down. But proposing alternatives to Uthman as caliph, the rebels swayed public opinion in Medina to the point where Uthman's faction could no longer offer a united front. Uthman had the active support of the Umayyads and a few other people in Medina. The early stage of the siege of Uthman's house was not severe. However, as the days passed, the rebels couldn't stand anymore. They kept on pressing against Othman. They kept on revolutionizing with the departure of the pilgrims from Medina to Mecca. The rebel position was strengthened further, and as consequence, the crisis deepened. The rebels basically understood that after the Hajj, after the pilgrimage, the Muslims gathered all together at Mecca from all parts of the Muslim world. March to Medina to relieve Uthman. They therefore decided to take action against Uthman and against Uthman's government before the pilgrimage was even over. During the siege, Uthman was asked by his supporters, who outnumbered the rebels, to let them fight, but Uthman refused in an effort to avoid bloodshed among Muslims. Logically, unfortunately for Uthman, violence still occurred. The gates of the house of Uthman were shut and guarded, but eventually they sneak in and they burn it down and they killed him. Unfortunately, he was trying his best to protect the Muslim blood, but his blood went away. He was literally, it sounds that he sacrificed his own blood in order to rescue other Muslims at this case, because he was the ruler, he was in charge. He got that responsibility.